6 people.
Oh, good glory. Amen. Well, last week I wasn't here. Brother Joe led our lesson. And this week we're going to look at Ecclesiastes chapter 7. We're going to start with verse 10. And actually, I'm going to start with verse 10, even though we hit it 2 weeks ago when that's what we closed with. But I'm going to go ahead and start with that. Start with verse 10. If you got your Bibles, open up with me as we read the text that we're going to be looking at tonight. Verse 10 says, "Do not say, why were the former days better than these? For you do not inquire wisely concerning this. Wisdom is good with an inheritance and profitable to those who see the sun. For wisdom is a defense as money is a defense. But the excellence of knowledge is the wisdom, that wisdom gives life to those who have it." Then he says, "Consider the work of God, for who can make straight what he has made crooked? In the day of the prosperity, be joyful, but in the day of adversity, consider. Surely God has appointed the one as well as the other, so that man can find out nothing that will come after him." And I'm going to stop right there with verse 14. Verse 10, "Do not say, why were the former days better than these?" And you know, we talked about that a little bit whenever I closed last time. And we talked about how many of us are all really guilty of that. How many has ever asked that question? Thinking back to the good old days. Man, you know, I explained to y'all how I've done that throughout my life. But he says, "For you do not inquire wisely concerning this." You know, I still tried to wrap my mind around that. Why is it unwise to do that?
You're dwelling in the past.
Dwelling in the past? Yeah, you're dwelling in the past.
You'll
And
stumble if you're looking backwards. You're going to stumble.
If you're dwelling in the past, you can't be looking where God has you going now.
Nope.
You know, it's good to have memories. That's what our life becomes. And we don't, you know, when I tell people, especially at funerals a lot of times, I'll tell the families, you know, forget the bad ones. Hang on to the good ones. To remember the past, ain't nothing wrong with the good memories and remembering the good things, but to dwell on to the point to where we wish we was back there and how those were the good days and these ain't the good days. Well, he says it's not wise to do that, for you do not inquire wisely concerning this. Verse 11 says, "Wisdom is good with an inheritance and profitable to those who see the sun." You know, one of the marks of maturity is the ability to look at life in perspective and not get out of bounds. And what I mean by that is when you have God's wisdom, you will be able to accept and deal with the changing experiences of life. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Life is forever changing. Boy, that life we live in, if it don't change radically all the time, Lord have mercy. Yeah, especially now. You know, and that's what we're going to be looking at. You know, he talks about wealth. Wisdom is better than a generous inheritance. Money can lose its value, can't it? You know, I don't even remember what the show was. Oh, it was Little House on the Prairie. Remember Ingalls one time, he made this big inheritance, but it was all the Confederate money. And they were supposed to be going to be rich. Y'all remember that one? Nobody? You do? He does. All right. One man does. You know, he had inherited this big old, what was it? It was a carriage company. They built horse carriages. And supposedly they lost everything but what was in the trunk. And then they opened up the trunk and it was full of money. Carolyn got all excited, but Charles said, "This ain't no good. It's Confederate money." In other words, it's lost its value. You know, and money can lose its value or even be stolen, right? But true wisdom keeps its value, cannot be lost. And unless we become fools and abandon it deliberately, which how many of us has done that a time or two in our life? Bad choices or Brother Art, you ready to do that? I see Brother Eric back there laughing about it. We've all been there. But the person who has wealth but lacks wisdom will only waste his fortune. Tell me somebody in the Bible that did that. Prodigal son. Didn't he? Had it made, didn't he? So he thought, till he lost it all. But the person who has wisdom will know how to get and use wealth. And I guess we're getting a little wiser in our old age, because we're not wealthy by no means, but we got at least we got 2 nickels to rub together now instead of just one, huh? Right? Yeah, the person who has wisdom will know how to get it and use his wealth. And we should be grateful for the rich treasures of wisdom we have inherited from the past. How many has been there before? I can remember starting off boiler making. I can remember being on that grinder. That was my job. Me and another guy, we was the grinders and they was having the fiberglass the inside of these tanks because it was holding some kind of special liquid. And in order for the fiberglass to stick, it had to be smooth. You couldn't have welds in your verts and on your round seams. So we had to grind every weld on that tank. And this thing was like 200 foot in diameter and 80 feet high. In other words, that was a lot of grinding. A lot of grinding. And I got to thinking about that. I'm on this grinder, hating life. The thing was heavy, hot. You get all that grinding dust on you. And, oh, man. And that came to my mind. I can't wait till I get a little more experience on me where I ain't got to be on this grinder. It didn't take me long to learn that I started looking at figuring out how I could gain some wisdom to be able to, and there's so much truth in that statement. I can remember as a youngin', wishing that I could be where those guys were, even if it was just a fitter or a tackler. At least it wasn't on the grinder all day. Wisdom is like a shelter to those who obey it. It gives greater protection than money. In verse 11 says, wisdom is good with an inheritance and profitable to those who see the sun. And profitable. What is profitable about wisdom?
It helps you make the right choices.
Makes the right choices. To do what's right with the inheritance that we gain. And it'll be profitable. I was thinking about that with my retirement. I would like it to be a little more profitable than what it is. Our life has become that, really. I mean, if one of the things that I learned that makes life better, number one, don't move in haste. Don't move in haste. Be still. Wait on the Lord. Know His plan. God's got a plan for us. We're going to talk about that in a minute. God's plan and how that plan can't be thwarted. It can't be done away with. And that's one of the things that I have learned with wisdom in my own life is slow down a little bit. Slow down. Good night. Make sure you're headed down the road. I'll be halfway down the road before I realize it's even wrong. I'm like, good Lord. All that's wasted. Now I got to go back to point A and do it God's way. I just did wait. That's good stuff, isn't it? Wisdom is like a shelter to those who obey it. It gives a greater protection than money. Verse 13 talks about the providence. It says, consider the work of God, for who can make straight what He has made crooked? What does that mean? What does that mean? Anybody? What does that mean? Who can make straight what God has made crooked?
We don't have the power that God has, number one.
Well, we don't have the power God has,
Or the
no.
knowledge.
Nor the knowledge. You know what that means? God's got a plan, and if His plan is to go crooked, you ain't fixed to change that plan by trying to straighten it out.
No shortcuts.
No shortcuts, no. God has a plan in place. And There was a preacher who said to his people, he said this, learn to cooperate with the inevitable. Learn to cooperate with the inevitable. Think about that. What's inevitable? God's plan. It's going to happen the way He wants it to happen, when He wants it to happen, and how He wants it to happen. That's the inevitable. Learn to cooperate with that. We've been watching that show, Alone. Anybody ever watch that? Anybody? Y'all never watched? I need y'all to watch that because I'm going to ask if I can take a sabbatical to do this. I want to go up there in Alaska and be dropped off a helicopter and just see if I can outlive everybody else up there with nothing. I think I could do that. Am I pulling myself up?
5 minutes.
When you were talking about wisdom just a few minutes ago.
They have mosquitoes like
Up there fighting with the bears and
And the mosquitoes.
the mosquitoes, you know. And that's one of the things, one of the guys that won, you know what he figured out? Quit fighting the inevitable. The surroundings I'm in are going to be what they are. And the day that I learned to get along with what's going on here, and you know what, he won. He figured that out. And it's the same with us, with the Lord. Quit, don't fight it. God's plan, you know, Isaiah said His ways are what? Higher than our ways. His thoughts are what? Deeper than our thoughts. There ain't nothing we can, you know, if God's plan's inevitable, go along with it. It's so much easier to go with the grain than going against the grain. How many ever paddled a canoe upstream? I've done that a time or two. A little bit easier going with it, though. You just have to hit it every now and then, stroke every now and then to keep it straight. But when you're going against the stream, that's trying to get your gun Kate apart the door. All you can do. And the same way with this. And a lot of it's just hard-headedness, being hard-headedness. The Living Bible paraphrases it. It says, see the ways God does things and fall into line with them. That's what it's talking about. Don't fight the facts of nature. And you know, that's one of the things that I've kind of had to really learn in my life. Is not to fight and you know, that's the biggest thing with life. If you can ever get to the point to figuring out that your way ain't the right way anyhow. Anybody ever figured that out?
That's what Blackaby was talking about. Slow down and look where God's working and get involved.
You get involved with that. Yep. Get involved with that. You know, this is a sensible invitation to life that the Lord's talking about here. To a life yielded to the will of God. That's all it is. Yielded to the will of God. What is God's will for our life? What is God's will for your life? You know, I talked about raising the bar. That's going to be our next slogan as a church. We're raising the bar with who we are. We're raising the bar with our relationship with Christ. We're raising our bar as a church that we are in. Not just with our relationship, but everything we do as a church. How we operate. We're fixing to raise the bar. It's time to step up and grow a little bit more, mature a little bit more, and function a little better. You know, that's all I'm talking about, is functioning better in our relationship with the Lord. If God makes something crooked, He is able to make it straight. And perhaps He will ask us to work with Him to get the job done, time or two. That's what you said in your blanket. But if He wants it to stay crooked, we'd better not argue with Him. Because all you're doing is beating your head against the wall. And we've all been there. You know, we don't really understand all the works of God. Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 5, the Word of God says this, as you do not know what is the way of the wind, or how the bones grow in the womb of her who is with child, so you do not know the works of God, who makes everything. You know, we don't fully understand all the works of God and how He operates. We just need to get on board with it. You know, but we do know that He hath made everything beautiful in its time, according to Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 11. You know, and while I don't agree with all of His theology, I do, you know, that serenity prayer that was written by Reinhold, how do you say his last name? Newberg? Winifred, you don't know? This is what it fits the lesson that Solomon's teaching here in verse 13. He says, "O God, give us the serenity to accept the things that cannot be changed, courage to change the things that should be changed, and wisdom to distinguish the one from the other." Y'all heard that prayer before? Isn't that in the AA?
Yep.
Yeah. So, and you know, that needs to be, give us the courage to accept what we can't. And to know what we can't, just move on. But the things He does want us to change, He'll give us the strength to do that. Amen? Verse 14, the Word of God says this: "In the day of prosperity be joyful, but in the day of adversity consider. Surely God has appointed the one as well as the other, so that the man can find out nothing that will come after him." You know, talking about that, wisdom gives us perspective so that we aren't discouraged when times are difficult or when things are going well. It takes a good deal of spirituality to be able to accept the prosperity, being prosperous, but also the adversity and the poor times when they come. For often, you know, because think about that. If we didn't have the hard times, the difficult times, just if everything was just prosperous, what would we really gain from that? What would we learn? It's in the hard times we learn to do the most learning. Who would agree with that? The valleys
We learn
is
to
where we do
depend on God then.
our best learning.
We learn to depend on God then. If everything's good,
Yeah, we don't need
what
it.
do we need?
It's kind of where our country is.
Yeah.
You know, I'm reminded of that old country preacher who used that analogy. And he was old back when I was a kid, but I'll never forget that story, how he remembered when his granddaddy was a farmer and how they would come to church every night praying for rain. He said, but we don't need that no more because we got these pivots now. All we go do is go turn on a switch, irrigate the whole 100-acre field at one time. We got to a point where we don't depend on the Lord, don't need Him. You know, a lot of truth in that, isn't there? And I got to thinking about, you know, Philippians chapter 4, verse 10 through 13. I want to read that. That's what Paul says. Y'all know the passage well. But this is what Paul says. "But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at last your care for me has flourished again, though you surely did care, but you lacked opportunity. Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need." But then he says, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." He's learned how to be content, whether he has it or whether he don't. You know, that's the important thing. Job reminded his wife of this truth when she told him to curse God and die. Y'all know that. And Job says, "What? Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil?" And in chapter 2, verse 10, earlier, Job had said this. He said, "The Lord gave, and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Blessed be the name of the Lord. See, God balances our lives by giving us enough blessing to keep us happy and enough burdens to keep us humble.
Amen.
Well, that's pretty right. We need to put that on the doorpost of our houses right there. Give me enough blessing to keep me happy, but enough difficulty to keep me humble. That's good right there. See, if all we had were blessings in our hands, we would fall right over. So the Lord balances us. He uses us as a scale. He don't just give us all over here where we fall over. He gives us enough of both to where we're able to stay balanced and blessed with blessings and burdens on our backs. That helps us to stay steady, and that's what He wants. To stay steady in our relationship with Him. To stay dependent, to stay humble, and not haughty. But you know, if we would yield to Him in our relationship, if we'll just submit to God, He can even turn the burdens into blessings. And more often than not, He does.
Yeah.
You know. But why does God constitute our lives this way? And I got to thinking about that. The president of the university out there, or the Southwestern, I can't think of his name, but he asked that question. Why does God constitute our lives in this way? He says to keep us from thinking we know it all and that we can manage our lives by ourselves. There you go. They can, you know, because we can't. Can't do it.
Amen.
Therefore, a man cannot discover anything about his future. Verse 14 says, a man cannot, that's the NIV version. But it says, so that a man can find out nothing that will come after him. And that's the future. Just about the time we think we have an explanation for things, God changes the situation and we have to throw our formula. You ever notice that? And you know, that's one of the traps that we get into as a church, is we think that we just use the same formula to keep coming up with the results that God gave us 10 years ago, a year ago, 5 years ago. But you know, but we look at Scripture, God never did anything the same way twice to get the same result. And what I mean by that, Moses, how did he tell him to get water the first time? Strike a rock. What did he tell him to do the second time?
Speak to it.
Speak to the rock. Jesus, what did he do with the first blind man? What did he do? Spit in the dirt and put it on his eyes.
Yeah.
Second time, what did he do? He healed him, just spoke it. You know, God, nowhere in Scripture, and I really started questioning that, but I've not found it yet, where God does the same thing, the same way to get a result. He always uses a different way. That's pretty neat, ain't it? So let's not get caught up in that. Let's understand that God's ways are always changing. His ways are always changing. You know, and that's why it's so important that we are walking with the Lord, to know what His way even is. Because like I said, all too often, we get halfway down the road before we figure out that ain't even the way we're supposed to be going anyway. Good Lord. So by the time you come back to point A, and then start the direction you are, look how far behind you already. You done went half a mile wrong way, half a mile back. That's a mile up the way. You could have done been a mile up the other way. You know, let's talk about making every lick count. Every lick count. Make every lick count. God changes the situation, and we have to throw out our formulas. We have to use His formula. No matter how much experience we have in the Christian life or how many books we read, we must still walk by faith. Walking by faith. You know. In verse 15 through 18, let's read that. I have seen everything in my days of vanity, he says. There is a just man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man who prolongs his life in his wickedness. Do not the overly righteous, do not be overly righteous, nor be overly wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Do not be overly wicked, nor be foolish. Why should you die before your time? Okay? And there's the passage that I hang my hat on right there when I'm counseling with people. And when I explain to people that you can die before your time. You can pull your number. And I think about that, and you know, I thanks be to God that He protected me. But there are just so many things. You know, I was coming back from Tampa, Florida one night on a KZ900. Well, it takes 2 hours in a car. I made it 45 minutes. Ain't but nothing but God's hand that kept me from. Another one bites the dust. You know. I look back at my life and I see how I could have surely died before my time because of my foolishness. Unbelievable. But you know, righteousness and sin. Let's look at that, verse 15 and 18. If there is one problem in life that demands a mature perspective, it is, why do the righteous suffer and the wicked prosper? How many's ever asked that question? Why in the world? The good die young, while the wicked seem to enjoy long lives, and it seems to be contrary to the justice of God. Have you ever thought about that?
It used to bother me, but I think that it's a blessing to not have to endure this world any longer. To get out of here and not put up with this foolishness.
The wicked get their rewards down here.
You hit the nail dead on the head. And And that's what we're going to look at now. The wicked appear to prosper only if you take the short view of things. The short view. And the short view is our life. Our life is but a vapor. Right? And this was the lesson. Psalm 73, and that Paul reinforced in chapter 8 of Romans, and 2 Corinthians chapter 4, they have their reward, Jesus said. They will have their reward. And that's all the reward that they'll ever get. See, their reward on this earth is all that they'll ever get. Though it seems like it's a great reward now, but in the small scheme of things, that's no reward at all, is it? You think about it. How about this? We know the passage, they may gain the world, but they lose their own soul.
That's terrible.
Solomon said to the people, don't claim to be righteous and don't claim to be wise. In other words, he was warning them against self-righteousness and the pride that comes when we think that we have arrived. Pride is what he's talking about. And we think we know it all. See, Solomon made it clear in verse 20 that there are no righteous people, so he can't be referring to true righteousness. In other words, let's keep things in perspective. Context determines meaning. He says in verse 20, for there is not a just man on earth who does good and does not sin. In other words, he's not talking about being righteous in God's way. He's talking about our self-righteousness that our churches are full of. See, when we're self-righteous, we see the fault in everybody else. And the more fault we find in them, the better we make ourselves feel. See that? But that's not God. That's not true righteousness. See, Solomon made it clear there, didn't he? He was condemning the self-righteousness of the hypocrite and the false wisdom of the proud, and he warned that these sins led to destruction and death. And that's all it leads to. It leads to death. But verse 18, we should take hold of the true righteousness and should not withdraw from the wisdom. That's what verse 18. It is good that you grasp this and also not remove your hand from the other. For he who fears God will escape them all. He who fears God. Now we're getting to the meat of the matter, talking about fearing the Lord. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom according to Proverbs chapter 9, isn't it? And Jesus is to the believer wisdom and righteousness. 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verse 30. Wisdom and righteousness is what Jesus is to the believer. And God's people need not manufacture these blessings themselves. Trying to manufacture the blessings that only can come from the Lord will never come about. Those two passages right there are the ones that have probably spoke to me into my life here within the last 5 years more than anything. Looking at verse 10 and then looking at verse 18. It is good to grasp them and also to remove your hand from the other, for he who fears God will escape them all. Fearing God. And then verse 10, talking about the former days. Not looking back. Man, we can't move forward if we always focused on what used to be. Focusing on what used to be. And that's something I was pretty guilty of for a long time. Any other thoughts? None? Miss Terry?
You covered it all.
No, I ain't covered it all.
It was good.
Huh?
You did good.
I like Miss Terry. She's got the gift of making you feel good. You know what I mean? She really does. Don't she, woman? She does, don't she? We love her to death, don't we?
I'll tell you another gift she's got too. She's got some of the most eloquent prayers I've ever heard.
Yeah, she's got a prayer life that's awesome too. You're exactly right. Y'all don't forget to pray for Miss Terry. She's in the hour she's in with her life, and it's just a road she has to go down. We talked a little bit about it today, and I hope you don't mind me saying, but it's just a part of life that she's got to endure on her own. As much as we love her, but in the loss of Charles and her world being totally different now. But y'all just lift up Miss Terry when you think about her. We welcome our visitor tonight. She's from South Carolina. We told her we wouldn't hold that against her. Thank you for coming. And it's good to have you. And at this point I do have a prayer request. What I do with it? There it is. Let's see. Tuesday, which was yesterday, Gordon had to go to the doctor to get his sugar regulated because he said he was waking up and his sugar was 600. I don't know what that means.
That's bad.
That's
That's
terrible.
okay, get it.
Wow.
So he said pray that would get regulated and get worked out at the doctor's yesterday. Friday, he's got to swallow some barium dye. Y'all know what that is?
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes to, the following Tuesday, he goes to the oncologist for plan of attack on the rest of his cancer. So those are some things that he's got coming up. Y'all remember tonight's lesson. Life is ever changing. And the person who can adapt to the changing of life is the one that can learn to be successful. Life is ever changing, isn't it? Any other prayer requests?
Other than Brittany Eli.
Yeah, Brittany and Eli. She's going in the hospital Sunday night, right? And then they're going to have her, make her have the baby Monday.
We're gonna have a baby Monday, one way or the other.
Baby Monday, and then they're going to rush it to the hospital, right? For heart surgery.
That's the plan right now.
Okay.
Miss Terry's gonna be traveling. We keep her in
Yep.
prayers.
Miss Terry's going with her sisters and family. That'll be a fun time. Y'all remember her sister?
Yes.
Well,
Sisters.
you get the both of them together, you got a mess on your hands.
There's 3 of them.
Really? Yeah, but the older one, she wasn't cut up to y'all.
Me and John's more alike. I'm the middle one and she's the baby. We're just
Yeah.
small.
Yeah, your sister's the one that keeps it going with everybody, the
Yes, she
youngest.
does, she does.
Yeah, we had a good time with them. That'll be fun. I know you're gonna enjoy that.
Yes.
Remember Jack and
Yep, Jack
Bates?
and,
And Stella's grandmother in Iowa, Amy, Grandma Amy, she's still battling cancer, and she's just, due to all the treatment and everything, yesterday they did oral surgery and removed all of her teeth. So she's having a time, but she still has cancer. She's still going through treatment, and it's not a good thing.
yeah,
But Jack and Amy are pretty sick people.
okay. Jack and Amy, those are grandparents of Stella, right?
Well, Jack might as well be her grandpa. She's had him ever since she was born. Jack-
Yeah, that's your daughter's
That's our
Father-in-law.
daughter's father.
father-in-law. Yeah.
Jack loves her as if she was his own.
I did talk to Dwayne yesterday, and he said it's hard. He said, we thank you to cover the prayers, because it is a hard time right now.
Christine asked us to remember.
Yeah, Christine's
She's struggling for help.
something going on with Christine Mallory.
Just struggling, and she said it's our health causing her to have the issues with the walking and the hands and stuff, so.
Mhm. Everybody here, almost everybody here is Sunday school folks. I'm gonna tell you, if you're not coming to Sunday school, you're missing a blessing.
Amen.
We are sure having a good time in our class, and those folks are just sucking it up. Oh, Christy, I thought she was gonna go preaching the other day. She tore out. It was good. No, I'm teasing, but we really having a good time. She don't know what to think. But it's good stuff in that Sunday school class. Scott and Constance and Chase and Christy and then Christy and brother Eric back there. We really learned a lot.
And her mom's the
Yeah, Rachel's mom, we went up there, thought we was gonna vacate, and ended up, you know, there's nothing worse than trying to take care of business with an 81-year-old lady who can't hear. You want a challenge, you go do that one.
was more than that.
We went on vacation but it was a blessing. We had a good time with her mom. And the situation there is that she's coming to terms with, and the family is, and we're all trying to figure out what the best plan for her is to be able to move down to Florida and how to make that happen. And so that's where that is. After she's lived up there by herself for all this time, she's about to learn. You know, I asked her brother the other day. I asked Rachel's brother. I said, "Have you ever sat down in her car and went for a ride with her?" He said, "I ain't done that in 20 years, and I ain't fixing to." I said, "Well, then why do you, you know?" No, I asked him, "Well, why not?" He said, "Dude, have you seen her driving?" I said, "Then why are you entrusting her with it? And everybody else that she's driving around." He just kind of got quiet. You know, it's a mess. Closest thing I can remember when I first got here, the first Sunday I was here, I won't never forget, Miss Irma pulled up out here. That was the last time she drove to church. And I thought, man, what is she doing driving? Y'all laugh at me, but y'all probably thinking the same thing. But then I noticed right after that, Robert started bringing her to church. Okay, that's about, you know. So that's a prayer need for Rachel and I. Remember our country and just the stuff that we're in with this COVID. They're trying to say that it's breaking out in Florida real bad again. I'm hoping that it don't. Have y'all heard that?
They're just getting more testing done.
That I do. You know. So that's, you know, maybe they'll listen to Trump. He says, "Stop the test." Didn't he? So, any more prayer requests?
You know, you were speaking about Rachel's mom and her driving. You know, you think about her too. She driven all her life. And people start telling her she can't do this, she can't do that.
Take away her dignity.
You know, I think about that for myself. It's not going to go well with me when Andy drives. I can't do that. You know, you always think about her feelings too.
Yeah. Somebody, God, it ain't gonna do well with me. Andy and Brandon start telling me, you know, you think about that. Yeah, how true is that? I mean, it's when somebody tells me I can't do something that I just got to do it.
Now you think about when your boys start trying to tell you, you can't drive that. You know, that's not going to sit well with you.
No, it ain't. That's funny. Lord, yeah, we do need to remember Mom.
Well,
Cecil.
she knows, but at the same time, I mean, sometimes too, though, they don't realize, they think they're capable, but they don't realize their reflexes are slower, they don't react quick enough. They don't realize that, so that's where, you know, we're being real sensitive. Don't worry about that, but we know at the same time.
Well, Brother Tim, I was talking to Art the other day about it, and he was telling me about his dad. He said, we went over there and finally sat him down. "Dad, you can't drive no more," and took the keys from him. Well, a week went by, and then his sister calls him up. "Hey, did you know Dad's driving downtown?" He said, "What?" So he goes over there and he said, "Give me his." After 5 sets of keys, he had 5 sets of keys. He's pretty smart, wasn't he? They might get this one. That's good to laugh in the Lord's house, isn't it? I'll tell you what. Brother Tim, why don't you close us in prayer tonight, remembering all the prayer requests if you can.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you